All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. You should be seeing me, hearing me, seeing my slides. Someone give me a thumbs up that we're good to go.
Yeah, all's good.
Okay, great, good. All right, and recording is already on. Let's get started. Let's do this. Today's Rubin Science Assembly, our topic is pretty much a little review of Data Preview 0 and a big thank you to our delegates who've been participating. Maybe you just joined, maybe you've been here for the full 3.5 years, but either way, we want to take a moment to recognize our success and thank everyone. So today we're going to start out with some announcements and then we'll have the presentation. I think it's around 30 minutes, and then there'll be some open time for sharing comments, sharing your experiences of DP0, or just asking questions about what I've said. So to start with some announcements, first off, if you haven't heard already, save the date for the Rubin Community Workshop 2025. It's going to be the week of July 28th. It's going to be back in Tucson again this year, and it will be fully hybrid, like it was last year. The in-person limit will be 250 people. Registration's not open yet, but keep an eye out. There'll be lots of announcements when it is. The other announcement is that ComCam commissioning was complete. It was complete as of December. There's a final update in the Rubin Community Forum, and the interim report on the ComCam OnSky campaign is available in a tech note. Both of those are linked here. I meant to get you let me share the slides. It's nicer if you can actually get to the links. All right, that's in the chat. The AAS was last week or maybe the week before. The slide deck that was presented at the Rubin Town Hall at AAS provides a very nice summary of the ComCam and what's going to happen going forward. So there's a link to that there. Those slides you can take a look through. It includes some really nice pictures from ComCam commissioning, and it also includes the revised early science timeline for the rest of this year. Upcoming Rubin Science Assemblies. In 2 weeks, we're going to have a look forward to Data Preview 0. So in that one, I'll cover sort of a lot of the things about ComCam and how it went and what to expect for DP1. Thursday, February 20th, we're planning on sort of like an in-depth intensive tutorial about how to use the portal aspects. So going into like, what do all those buttons do? How do I do this and that? How do I do things like I did them in DS9? That kind of thing is what we'll do on Thursday, February 20th. And then coming up March through May, we're going to have a bunch of DP1 preparation sessions that are organized by astronomy subfield. So we'll have like transient and variables day to come and find out, how to access data from that science perspective. Which data products are you going to need to use, that kind of thing. So you'll hear a lot more about that later. We'll start that advertising once we have that schedule locked down. Just in case you missed it, there was a press release or a press announcement, and there is a shareable ComCam image that has been released. This is it. You can get it by going to that link there, rubinobservatory.org/news. You'll find that press release, and that is something that you can look at. It's ComCam data. You can share it. You can use it. It is there, and it is very cool. Want to announce that the Link Frameworks mission is so Link is they're a bunch of staff, basically developers, software engineers who are building astronomy software to use with the Rubin data. They are having office hours where you can drop in and get information and get help with using the tools that they're making. And those office hours happen Thursdays right after the Rubin Science Assemblies. So here's a slide advertising what they're doing, and know that that's always happening right after these assemblies. And there's a Zoom link there, so you can drop in on the link, folks, at any time. And our final announcement slide is, as always, our introduction to the users committee. Especially if you're new here, know that there is a users committee. They do advocate on your behalf, and they would love to hear from you about your experiences using the Rubin Science platform and the Rubin data. So there's a slide here with their contact information. All right, so I think maybe this is a final announcement. Just in case you're new here, this is like a DP0 review but I know people are constantly joining. This might be your first Rubin Science Assembly. So just in case this is helpful, here's the links of where to get the RSP account, where to find resources for Data Preview 0, where to find information about the data products that are currently available. There's also a new website at rubinobservatory.org/for-scientists that is general information about Rubin and about the Legacy Survey of Space and Time for scientists. That's up now, so that's another place where you can go. And also, if you're new, please do stick around for the rest of the time. Stay for the Q&A. Questions from people who are new to Rubin are always welcome, even in sessions like this when we're reviewing past accomplishments. So again, in case you're new here, I just want to start off with a what is Data Preview 0? What are we sort of celebrating today? And a reminder that Data Preview 0 is based on simulations that were created by the science community. One of those simulations was of extragalactic and galactic objects. It was created by the Dark Energy Science Collaboration for their Data Challenge 2. It simulated clusters, galaxies, Type 1a supernovae, and stars, including some variable stars. It simulated observations over 300 square degrees for 5 years of survey operations in the 6 filters. And that simulation and the images that they simulated were used for phases 1 and 2 of Data Preview 0, which we call DP0.1 and DP0.2. There was a second simulation that just included solar system objects that was created by members of the Rubin Solar System Pipelines team and the commissioning team with help from the LSST Solar System Science Collaboration. That simulation included all minor planet center objects, plus a bunch of simulated LSST discovered objects. So it was simulated observations for both real and simulated solar system objects. And those catalogs represented 10 years of LSST observations. There's also a 1-year version of the simulated catalogs available, and that was used for phase 3 of Data Preview 0, and we call that DP0.3. For access to those simulated data products, we use the Rubin Science Platform, which we often call just RSP. It is a set of integrated web-based applications and services that are running at the Rubin Observatory Data Access Centers, which are sometimes called the DACs. So you might hear the term the US DAC, which is the Data Access Center in the USA. The RSP allows users to bring their analysis to the data and avoid huge downloads. It has 3 aspects: a portal aspect, a notebook aspect, and an API aspect, where the portal is very much like a graphical user face that allows discovery and exploration of the data. The notebook aspect is a Jupyter lab that allows Pythonic and programmatic access to the data. And then the API access is for remote access, so PyBio, TopCat, that kind of thing. So altogether, the RSP provides tools to query, visualize, subset, and analyze the full LSST data archives in a stable software environment that includes the LSST science pipelines pre-installed, that is located next to the data, and it also offers the storage space, compute resources, and those remote access options that I mentioned. So that's what Data Preview 0 is, and that's what the RSP is. And you need to know those 2 things to remember what the goals of doing Data Preview 0 were in the first place. So our goals were to, 1, serve as an early integration test of the Legacy Survey of Space and Time, the science pipelines. So the code, that's the code that does the data reduction and processing and calibration of the images and the creation of the data products. So the first goal of DP0 was to serve as an early integration test of the science pipelines and the RSP. And the second goal was to enable a limited number of astronomers and students to begin early preparations for science with the LSST. So let's take a look at that first goal, to serve as an integration test for Rubin. We basically achieved that over the DP0's 3 phases. So with phase 1, with DP0.1, Desk processed their simulated raw images with the LSST science pipelines, and then those processed images and catalogs that came out of the Desk processing were ingested and served by Rubin staff via the RSP. So that was phase 1 as an integration test, just ingesting and serving data to users. Phase 2 for DP0.2, it was Rubin staff processed those same simulated raw images from the desk, but with a more updated version of the LSST science pipelines, and then also ingested and served that processed data into the RSP. So that was phase 2. I will note also that DP0.1 is now deprecated. It's not served anymore, basically replaced by DP0.2. And then in phase 3, DP0.3, the DP0.3 creator team generated the simulated observations and the catalogs, and then those catalogs were ingested and served by Rubin staff via the RSP. So right now, both DP0.2 and 0.3 continue to be served. Altogether, these 3 phases demonstrated Rubin's ability to process, calibrate, and serve LSST-like data to users. So that was the integration test. As a separate note, I'd said a few times serve data. And what does it mean to serve data exactly? What are we testing? What are we doing? It just means to make accessible to users for scientific analysis. So there are 2 main ways that the RSP serves the data. One of them is the data butler that is available via the notebook aspect. And it's available it's like a command line package. That's a Python package that you can use in a notebook or from the command line. And then the second way that the RSP serves data is the table access protocol or TAP service. That's not unique to the RSP. Lots of facilities use TAP to serve their data. And both of these data access services, they enable scientifically motivated queries so that users can retrieve subsets, and they return the data products in formats designed for scientific analysis. And I'm making this point that this integration test of serving the data, it's not just like popping up some FITS files for FTP somewhere. It's really serving the data in a way that makes it easy for scientists to access it in a programmatic way and to do analysis with that data. So we're serving it for science. So that DP0 data is accessible via both the Butler and TAP. So both of these ways of serving the data for science were tested and integrated with DP0. And even beyond the goal of an integration test, Data Preview 0 has aided RSP development. So aside from just serving the data, making it available, and you'll know this if you've been with us for the past 3.5 years, there's lots of new and improved user-facing RSP functionality has come out over the past 3 years. So when we started, there were no HIPS maps. There are HIPS maps now. We now have TAP-based image services, where when we started, it was only catalogs were served via TAP. There are now image cutout tools. Users have the ability to upload tables to cross-match and join. We changed our identity management system in early 2023. And if you've been with us for 3 years, you've seen the portal aspect layout pretty much completely change and be updated. So all of these developments in the LSSD science pipelines and backend services have proceeded, such as simplification of the Butler query methods and the addition of a synthetic source injection package. Right. So there's the sort of user-facing RSP functionality has been in development. You've seen changes there, but also, the science pipelines have evolved as well. So there's been lots of changes, and having active users during this time has been really useful sort of across Rubin, not just for RSP developers, but for science pipelines and our middleware team and pretty much everyone. In addition to the data services, the backend, the science pipelines, and all of that, having users has really helped us, obviously, to develop and improve our user-facing resources. So you've seen documentation evolve over the past 3 years as we've produced our data products definitions documents, added processing descriptions to them. We have the table schema available. We have 46 tutorials now, and we're still growing, still adding them all the time. There's 34 tutorials for Data Preview 0.2 and 12 for DP0.3. And along the way, we've also defined standards to try and ensure a really high level of quality for those tutorials. We've been giving support via the Rubin Community Forum. There's been hundreds of solved topics on DP0 over the past 3 years in the Rubin Community Forum. And throughout all this time, we've been really trying to build up our engagement, like our live virtual sessions. So we now have the weekly Rubin Science Assemblies. For a while, we were doing monthly third Thursdays for the global community, which we might bring back again. And then we also have right now it's an annual Rubin Data Academy, but we might bump up to twice a year on that. So having users has really helped us with obviously all of our user-facing resources. So it's um, another sort of achieved goal as part of goal 1 of an integration test for Rubin. Looking at goal number 2, which was to allow a limited number of science community members, scientists and students, to start to prepare for LSST, I have this plot for you showing the number of people who had or currently have an account in the Rubin Science platform at data.lsst.cloud. So if you remember back in June 2021 with DP 0.1, we started with only 300 initial DP0 delegates. And by next year, we doubled that, increased it to 300. So we had about 600 DP0 delegates or people who had Rubin Science Platform accounts by early 2023. That's when we had our identity migration. So we changed from using solely GitHub to using the CI logon system. And that's at that point, instead of having like 300 people all start at the same time and then 300 people start again a year later, we sort of went into a rolling self-sign up system where people can request and get their accounts at any time. So that's when you start to see, that's when this plot starts. It starts at that time when we started basically self-sign up. And so you can see how the numbers have just been kind of steadily increasing ever since then. And now we're up to 1,600 people who have taken some action to get their Rubin Science Platform account, which is really great. So we're just kind of going to keep rolling with that through Data Preview 1. In terms of science community preparation, we've had lots of engagement in our activities. So hundreds of participants in virtual events. We've hosted about 20 guest speakers during the assemblies, and these were all Data Preview 0 participants who'd done something with DP0 and then wanted to share it with people. And we have many of you provide feedback from our surveys, which we really appreciate. We've had about 20 people contribute various notebooks to shared repositories, demonstrating how they would do their science with the DP0 data. We've had working groups form sort of around or catalyzed by DP0, a lot of community-led groups. We've had people lead PARE grants, so that's funding grants for their DP0 related work. And we've seen new networks emerge, especially among smaller institutions and networks for students that have also sort of been catalyzed by DP0. And 2 papers have come out that I can find that are based on Data Preview 0. So in terms of having people come, use the data, figure out how to use the Rubin Science Platform, and really use DP0 as a chance to prepare for Rubin data and the LSST, I think that goal has definitely been achieved as well, with this being the evidence. We've had a few sessions, this was a few years ago now, but a few networking sessions. So this is just sort of a nice bunch of slides from a delegate assembly where we just had people sort of come and give flash talks about what they were interested in as a way for people to network. And that was really effective. This is kind of a fun memory for me. And from our feedback surveys, I just collected a couple of quotes from Data Preview 0 delegates that I found particularly sort of representative of the delegate experience. So I'm just going to give you a moment to read through these. I won't read them out loud, but I do like these because they're often like a mix of good and bad. So it's often things like, wow, there's a lot to learn, but I'm having a good time learning it and I'm looking forward to Rubin. So I'll just give you a moment to read through those. All right, so hopefully through these quotes from other delegates, you can see things about like a bit of apprehension about, how to use Rubin data, but sort of, we're getting through it together and an appreciation of the networking and of the resources being available. So that was great. I just really like these quotes. Um, with that said, I also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that Data Preview Zero did not equally help everyone to prepare. A lot of the reports that came back were about the fairly steep learning curve and about how that learning curve requires time. It's time that people don't have. Some people really struggled to, for example, justify to their department leads why they should be spending time on simulated data and learning and preparing. Um, and we know that, especially also that our colleagues at smaller institutes or with really teaching heavy loads, they don't have a lot of time to just sort of sit and work through a whole bunch of tutorials to learn. And so we appreciate that. One of the things we've tried to do over the course of DP0 is provide like one-on-one accelerated onboarding sessions for researchers at non-R1, R2 institutes to sort of cut down all the reading and the figuring out that you have to do when you first get started and just kind of get them straight to like, yep, let's get your RSP account set up. And since you are interested in this kind of science, you should start with actually tutorial number 5 instead of tutorial number 1 or things like that. So we've been trying to find ways to help people with limited amounts of time to prepare. We also heard pretty clearly that a lot of students felt pretty lost when they were sent to learn. Um, our beginner level resources, so like a tutorial that says it's for the beginner level, we actually assume students have a basic astronomy knowledge, they've taken a class or two, and we also assume that they have a research advisor who's told them, like, this is what the project is that you're going to do. But in response to some of this feedback, we've tried to develop more the concept of an unaccompanied undergrad as a user profile and consider that when we're making our resources for users. And we're also starting to develop some course modules at the upper undergrad level, things that students can be pointed to or that faculty can use in their classes to help people learn about Rubin, how to do science with Rubin in a classroom setting. So we hope that those things are going to help with that feeling of being lost that some students have reported. I also wanted to acknowledge that the simulations were limited in the objects that they contain. Of course, they were made by people whose primary interests were cosmology and solar systems. So that's what the objects, that's what the simulations contain. We're missing, like very understandably missing transient and variable types aside from type 1a supernovae, and there were no AGN in the simulations that we used. Similarly, there was no low surface brightness objects like streams or intracluster light. And this is not fixable with DP0. There will be no DP0, no new simulations, but this will, when the real data comes, it will have everything. So I just wanted to take a moment to point out sort of in some of the ways that DP0 did not help people, and we acknowledge that. And like I mentioned, looking towards Data Preview 1, the first message that I want to say is that Data Preview 0 is not actually over. It's not going anywhere. DP 0.2 and 0.3 are going to remain available. The documentation and tutorials will be maintained and evolved. The virtual engagement sessions will continue to be DP0 based right up until we have the DP1 release. And of course, we're still going to support users to use the DP0 data set. So you can still ask questions about DP0, still use it. That's not changing. One thing that we are changing, though, is that the term DP0 delegate, that term is being retired. So initially, Data Preview 0 participation was limited. We just talked about how it was just 300 people at a time. And in the earliest days, it actually required an application. We were slightly oversubscribed. And so we came up with this term DP0 delegate to represent how the selected participants were like coming to DP0 to represent their communities and learn about Rubin, and then hopefully take that learning back to their communities. Um, over time, as we've been less constrained about how many RSP accounts we can offer to the science community, and especially with that switch to self-sign up, the term delegate has sort of evolved to mean everyone with an RSP account and DP0 access, without those special responsibilities, without that special role of the delegate that we had in early times. So really sort of the more appropriate word to use now is just user. You have an RSP account, you're an RSP user, you're using the LSST data, you're an LSST user. So going forward, we're just going to go with the term user. There's not a delegate equivalent for DP1. You want an RSP account, you just follow the self-sign-up procedure. So that term, we're retiring the term delegate. Its time has come to an end. But also looking towards DP1, when we won't be so limited in how many people can have accounts in the RSP. The DP1 will be based on real data from the commissioning camera, which was on Sky October to December of last year and did obtain a limited number of images. DP1 is going to include raw, processed, and co-added images and the associated source catalogs. And the anticipated release for that is June or July of this year. It's a little bit to be determined, but you will definitely hear about it once we know what the release date is going to be. In terms of preparing for Data Preview 1 over the upcoming Rubin Science Assemblies, as I mentioned at the start of today's session, in 2 weeks we'll have a general overview of the path to DP1 and what to expect. And then in March through May, we're going to run a bunch of DP0 based science series of hands-on tutorials by astronomy subfield. And then at the time when DP1 is released, there will be a bunch of virtual onboarding sessions and tutorials, and we will continue the Rubin Science Assemblies based on DP1 at that time. So there's going to be lots of opportunities for live virtual engagement with DP1. And if you're looking now for some publicly available information about commissioning and early science, I have a couple of links for you here. There's a lot of commissioning updates in the news category at the Rubin Community Forum. There's a sitcom tech note that kind of summarizes what ComCam did. And then, of course, there's Rubin Tech Note 11, which is Rubin Observatory plans for the early science program. And that's the one that really lays out the timeline of what data you're going to get access to and when that's going to happen. So again, as we move from DP0 towards DP1 and we retire the term delegates and we go forward with users, I just wanted to give a few messages from Rubin staff that express their gratitude for the work of DP0 delegates as our early participants. And so I have some here. So I have a message from Bob and Phil, who are Rubin operations directors. And they wanted to tell you that having an active and engaged community of DP0 delegates has given the observatory a huge head start on its preparations for serving and supporting the LSST data. We'll be ready in part due to your early participation. We also have a message from Leanne Guy, who's the Associate Director for System Performance for Rubin Observatory. And she says a huge thank you to all the DP0 delegates who gave their research time to participation in DP0. Your work has enabled us to better understand how the community will do science with LSST data and informed our plans to maximize early science. And then from me and the Rubin Commissioning Science team, we just wanted to say that we especially appreciate people bringing their questions and issues with DP0 to our attention via the Rubin Community Forum. That enables us to provide support for science and improve our documentation and tutorials. So we very much appreciate hearing issues, what's confusing to you, that kind of thing. We love to hear it, and hearing it through the community forum is especially useful for us because we can make sure those issues get solved, addressed, solved, and seen by everyone. So also these sentiments are echoed by the other Rubin departments and teams, Science Pipelines, our RSP developer team, and also the users committee. They very much appreciate hearing from you and knowing that you participated in DP0 as well. So just a big thank you to the delegates who've given their time so far over the past 3 years. We really made use of your feedback and your work. And so we sort of are graduating our delegates today, in a sense. This isn't exactly a cap and gown affair. We don't really have diplomas for you, but you do go forth with data access and you're empowered to use the RSP to access data. And so you will be ready for DP1. You've got your account set up. You'll be able to access that data on day one. So that's great. So thank you and congratulations for for surviving data preview 0. And that's really all I had for you today. Is just I just wanted to give a quick summary to really give an idea of what DP0 has meant to us, how your participation has helped us achieve the goals that we set out to achieve with DP0 in the first place. And I wanted to make sure that people had time to share their feedback about DP0, say if there was an aspect that you found particularly useful or that you didn't understand, whether or not you feel prepared or unprepared for DP1. And as always, any questions about RSP or DP0 or the simulations. And I can see some in the chat too, so and we'll get to those. So you can raise your hand or start posting in the chat. Just first, a round of applause for all our DP0 delegates. Thank you so much for sticking with us for these years. Yay, yes, wonderful. All right, as people are thinking about what they might want to share, I'll give you time to raise your hands. I'll start with the question in the chat from Tim. Is there a recommended dataset code for DP0 that should be used in papers that would aid tracking of use? Or is the citation info at? Yeah, Tim, you're right. It's the rubinobservatory.org. In the new for scientists area, there's that documentation, how to cite Rubin. That is what we have for now. So I think, yes, you found the right place. There is nothing else to cite for DP0. Just make sure you're citing, if you use DP0.2, do make sure you cite those desk papers that I think are listed on at the link you say, and I know they're listed in the DP0.2 documentation. So yes, and thank you, Bob, for your kind words, as always. And thank you, Vincenzo, too. It's been great to have you. And I saw a hand go up, and it's Jeff.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, like, in addition to it, to everybody's participation being like helpful to us, it's also been a pleasure getting to know many of you fairly well over quite a long time now. And so it's thanks for forming a little community.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. It's been great to network and even become friends. So yeah, that has been a really lovely aspect to meet people in the Rubin Science Assemblies, to hear about your work and just, yeah, get to know you, get to hang out. Yeah, Vincenzo, go ahead. Hi.
Yeah, hello everyone. I just want to thank you again for your contribution to DP0. And I think that you just forgot one thing, and maybe it's the most important, that one of the biggest contributions to DP0 was the community science team preparing notebooks and giving presentations. And this was extremely helpful because just having a simulation and having some example codes, I think would not have worked uh, as well as having assemblies and presentations, because in this way, users are guided towards running the notebook and trying to understand if they are able to do something. So it's not just a passive formal learning. So we've always been encouraged to try and to modify the codes, maybe to adapt these codes to our science case. So this was something incredible, and I think it's something that we should also keep in mind for future application, like future missions. The only negative point, maybe, as you told, among the others was the lack of some simulated sources that prevented many science group to test very specific science cases. But I guess now maybe we can try to do something with the DP1, working on actual images. And so that could be another possibility to get ready for the actual survey. Once at least we know how to use the platform and how to use all the tools, the technical tools, we just need to put the science now.
Yeah, thank you for making that point. It's good to hear because running live virtual engagement events does take a ton of work. And we suspected that they were really useful to people. So it's really good to hear that confirmed. Things are so different when you see them done live and you see other people make mistakes. And there was that great comment in one of the comments, it was this one down in the corner. I was hoping that one of the other delegates would go first so I could see what they did. That's why I included this one here too. And I think doing a lot more stuff out in the open, people find it really helpful to see what others do, like actually see how to do it. So thank you, Vincenzo. And thank you for writing a paper on DP0. That was really great. We really appreciated that. And one more comment based on what you said, because DP0 didn't have a lot of the objects, so it doesn't have like all the other kinds of transients. There's no gravitational wave events, there's no AGN. And so it doesn't serve everyone. As we will start to find out in 2 weeks, as we start to look more what DP1 is going to hold, I think DP1 still, I mean, there's not a plan to have difference imaging, I think, yet. That remains a stretch goal. And so even DP1 might not quite serve everyone in the same way, but together from DP 0.2 and 0.3 and DP1, I think we're going to start to reach more people. So that's, yeah, I just wanted to make that point too, that DP1 still might not include everything for everyone, but we will get there. DP1 will still be quite small, very, very, very much a preview still. We're still very much in the preview stage. So yes, so good. So thank you for making those points, Vincenzo, and for being here today. That's great. Let's go to Tim Lister.
Myself, thank you. Can you say anything? Are you willing to say anything from the RSP staff perspective of how RSP held up under DP0 and whether the people are feeling happy and confident about DP1 and operations?
Yeah, I can. I think it held up pretty well. I think we learned a lot about user queries and managing user expectations for how you write your query and how that gets executed on the back end. So because we did find in early phases, a poorly constructed query could affect how fast other people's queries are running, and the work to mitigate that, I know, is still ongoing. There's still lots of sort of back end work to figure out how to make queries faster, to figure out how to make the butler more, I don't want to say user friendly exactly. I think I'm just saying that there's a lot of back end work going on still to improve the services, and then that's been informed by seeing how people use them. But overall, I think it did stand up pretty well. I didn't see any sort of panics, nothing fell over in like majorly unexpected ways. So I think there's general confidence for supporting DP1, and also DP1 will be quite a bit smaller than DP0.2. So I think general confidence. Does that kind of answer your question, Tim?
Yeah, that's great, and good to hear. So, just a sort of caution from my experience working on big things is, expect naive or malicious users to attempt to suck the entire contents of the database out through whatever interface is made available within early times. It just always seems to happen.
Yeah. Generally, we found delegates were very good not a single malicious query did we ever see go by out there, so that was good. Just a few times where things can get accidentally. You can write queries that, I mean, I was probably one of them at some point. I submitted a query that ran too long and did it, you know, and wasn't great. So we've kind of all been there, but overall, very good. Yeah.
I would also, you know, thank those of you who were early users of Data Preview 0, like because those who were probably remember that there were some hiccups early on, you know, where we would have like during our assemblies that the load would just become too much and the RSP would kind of like lock up on everybody or things like that. And you know, so we definitely learned a lot from the process and improved as we went. And yeah, thanks to those of you who stuck it out through those difficulties.
Yeah, those were very informative. And I know the RSP developer team definitely used those experiences just to see how things like how their databases reacted in the wild to increased levels of user load. Super useful to see where the weak spots were. All right, any more comments, questions, feelings?
It's been great getting to know all of you.
Hey, Bob, good to see you. Yeah, Vincenzo, go ahead.
Just a quick question. Do you know for how long DP0 will be available to the RSP?
I don't yet, but we really don't want to take it down until the equivalent in real data exists. And so for things like time domain, that might mean DP2. Like we wouldn't take it down until DP2. That said, even now, the DP 0.2, because it was processed with such a much older version of the LSST science pipelines, it is kind of getting out of date and it's not a great representation of what like the format and stuff will look like. And it doesn't offer the capability to reprocess or to practice your image reprocessing in a lot of cases. So we might have to take it down before we actually get to DP2, but the intent is to keep it sort of as long as necessary, like to keep it until we have like the equivalent of real data. So we're going to try. Yeah.
Do we have an expected date for DP2 to come?
Yes. So DP1 is expected like this summer, June, July. I'd have to check Rubin Tech Note 11, but I think, and we will talk about the early science timeline in 2 weeks, but I think DP2 is more like early next year, I think is kind of because the data preview 2 uses LSST science camera, big camera, and that goes on sort of March, April, May might start taking data at the summit. And so then you need a good few months with science camera, and then you need time to process. Then we get DP2. So DP2, I think it's definitely listed as a next year thing, but yeah, so DP0 is definitely not going anywhere before DP1 and probably not going anywhere this year at all. So you still have it for quite a while.
I just checked in RTN 11 and in the draft that is going to be published very soon, the updated draft, and it says March to May of next year is the timeline for DP2.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for checking. All right, I'm going to stop recording.